Go to 2 Corinthians chapter 4. There's so many texts.
Chapter
4. There's so many texts that are illustrated by the last battle. But 2 Corinthians chapter 4. And there's many texts like this. Look at verse 7. Start at verse 7. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our bodies. For we who live are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus also may be manifested in our mortal flesh. So death is at work in us, but life in you. Go to verse 16. So we do not lose heart. And again, call to mind all that you're reading in the last battle. So we do not lose heart, though our outer self is wasting away, and our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light momentary affliction, and by the way, this light momentary affliction, that's your whole life. For this light momentary affliction, Paul says, is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. You know, one of the stupid remarks I'll point out to you from the book, we know it's a stupid remark because it's made by the dwarves. Remember, they make that stupid remark, seeing is believing. Not in the Christian faith. Not in the Christian faith. Believing is seeing in the Christian faith. We walk not by sight, but by faith. And that's what Paul says. We look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient. They're all passing away. But the things that are unseen are eternal. Again, we need to make sure we have healthy expectations about life. While you're there, probably one of the more famous verses that just a single verse captures this idea of Christian endurance. Look at Romans 8, verse 18. This is one of those that I'll commend to you for memorization. Romans 8:18. You probably know this one. Paul says, for I consider that the sufferings of this present time, he's talking about our whole life, for I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed. And you can translate that to us or in us, either way. So, hold on to this life very loosely. Put your tent pegs down just a little bit into the dirt. Don't be too intoxicated by this life, these slight momentary afflictions. Make sure you're being, and this is, I'm reviewing by the way, make sure you're being a little bit Saturn-like. Remember we talked about Saturn last week, being kind of the heavenly body behind all of the last battle. And Saturn is sort of the dying planet, so you learn a lot about death in here. But Saturn, we talked about last week, Saturn also is a planet in the medieval way of thinking, which Lewis knew well, is a planet that helps us pay attention to spiritual wisdom. Those verses from Paul. So, what chapters are we doing? 9, 10, 11, and 12. Another 4. And then next week we wrap up with the final 4. So let me make, You notice in the final chapter for today, 9, 10, 11, 12, chapter 12, we get into Aslan's land. So particularly from where we enter Aslan's land in chapter 12 through the end of the book, that's really where I want to hang out. But we have to get there. We have to get there. So you noticed a lot of death in chapters 9, 10, and 11. You in chapters 9, 10, and 11, you notice the last battle, about a chapter and a half of the last battle. You know, the good Narnians kind of win a skirmish, but then they lose the battle. I hope you probably were thinking, when you're looking at all the fighting in chapter 9, particularly 10 and 11, remember Jack Lewis was in World War I. So he's got background knowing battle. He was wounded in World War I. So, if you were getting, like I do with some of this text, you're getting a little weary of the war. He knew war. He knew it both from being in World War I, and which was a terrible war. If you travel through, any of you have ever traveled through England, you noticed, I'm sure, if you were paying attention, you noticed a whole lot more memorials to World War I than World War II. Now, you had, bombing was terrible during World War II. They lost a lot of soldiers during World War II. But World War I pretty much wiped out a generation of guys. Pretty much wiped out Jack's generation. He lived through World War I, never got over it, had nightmares for the rest of his life. I'm sure he revisited those nightmares when World War II happened and the Nazis started attacking England. And he also, of course, knew medieval literature. That was his daytime job, medieval and Renaissance literature. So he knew all about King Arthur and Sir Galahad and all that stuff. So he knew war from both personal experience and studying medieval war. So you had a lot of battle, a lot of war, probably more than you wanted. But part of what Saturn is wanting you to do here is think about death, so that you can live wisely, so that you can have spiritual wisdom, so that you don't live foolishly in this life. So chapter 9 is entitled The Great Meeting on Stable Hill. So, look at how it starts to make sure you keep the book tied together. For a long time, they could not speak or even shed a tear. Because what did they learn at the end of chapter 8? You're right, Narnia had fallen. Narnia had been conquered by the Calormans, the people kind of under Shift's power, Rishta's power. So Narnia had fallen. Cair Paravel had fallen. They had been taken by the sea. So, very sad line we looked at last week, the last couple paragraphs of chapter 8. So chapter 9, they could not even speak or even shed a tear. They're in shock because they learned that their kingdom has fallen. Cair Paravel, where Narnia was ruled from, is gone. So they decide to go back to Stable Hill. See, maybe if the truth can win out. What a great line, and it occurs more than once. That's why I'm going to term it a great line. In my edition, on the top of page 116, just maybe the second paragraph into chapter 9, you have the line there. You have the line there that says, "Take the adventure that Aslan sends us." Jack is trying really hard. I mean, this is a children's book, but Jack's trying really hard to say to us, be brave, have some courage. Don't center your life around fear. Don't let life intimidate you. Don't let, simple things just discombobulate you. Take the adventure. I mean, some people don't want any adventure. But particularly take the adventure that Aslan sends you. Bravery. Again, all of the Chronicles they talk about pilgrimage. Remember I told you last week there's a famous scholar who summarizes the Chronicles by saying, walk, walk, eat, eat, walk, walk, eat, eat, walk, walk, eat, eat. That's pretty much what you do in the Chronicles. It's about pilgrimage. You're on a journey. Where are you going? And are you invested in the journey? Are you participating in the journey? Or are you just circling the wagons trying to protect yourself? You know, are you a pilgrim or a settler? Some people prefer to be a settler. I had a mentor who wrote a book about Christian conversion, how we need to be always growing in the faith. He started that book with the image of, are you a pilgrim or a settler? A lot of people want to circle the wagons and settle and create your nest. But life, if you're trying to do that with life, you're going to be disappointed. Are you a settler or are you a pilgrim? But yeah, walk, 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 eat, eat, eat. I'm grateful for the eating that we get to do during the walking. We get the times of joy. But it's a pilgrimage. It's a journey. How are you doing with the journey? Are you taking the adventures that Aslan's sending you? C.S. Lewis one time famously said, courage is so necessary because courage is what's necessary for all the virtues that you may possess in your life, all the goodness that you have in your life. Without courage, you're going to just hide those virtues. Your virtues will never come out if you don't have some courage. The gifts of the Spirit that you have will never come out if you don't have some courage. You'll hide them. You'll keep them away. You'll worry about safety. And of course our culture, if you're reading contemporary literature about our culture, you learn that one of the biggest changes in the last decade that sociologists are writing about is our addiction to safetyism. That's been the new term, safetyism. When I was a kid, I used to go out and play in the woods, and I would get hurt. I would get cut. I usually didn't even let my parents know because I was afraid that they, wouldn't let me go out and be by myself and be with my friends in the woods. So, when I was growing up, we tried to be safe from physical harm. Now people want to be safe from ideas they don't like. They want to be safe from being offended. They want to be safe. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. If something happens to you, you can't say, well, that's just life. If something happens to you now, you've got to have somebody to blame because you have a right to safetyism. And it's getting ridiculous in this culture. Safetyism is not what life's about. And we're getting more and more, we think we should be safe and comfortable all the time. Take the adventure that Aslan sends us. Again, life is about conflict between good and evil. All the Chronicles do that. Just like all the Chronicles about a pilgrimage, you're always going somewhere. And the Chronicles are about good and evil. So take the adventure that Aslan sends us. They go back to Stable Hill, and you know what all that's about from your reading. They go back to Stable Hill. In my edition, on page 123, it's across, in my edition, it's across the page from one of Pauline Baines' sketching, where you see them kind of hiding as they're getting close to Stable Hill. It's where Tyrion says, and again, we can't even do this. Our culture is so highly sexualized. You can't even have a deep friendship between a Jonathan and David. You can't have a deep friendship between a unicorn, Jewel, and Tyrion. Everything's sexualized in this culture. Now, I'm sure I've told you, I know I've told somebody this story. I mean, in some cultures, it's very typical for men to kiss each other. That's not part of my Scott-Irish mountain roots in North Carolina. It's just not. And I remember getting off the bus in Jericho with some of my people, and a lot of people don't go to Jericho anymore because it's in the West Bank, and you're in Palestinian area. But I like going there. There's a store I like to shop in, and it thrills the Palestinian people. If somebody comes and visits there and doesn't avoid, because it's almost like a third world, but there's a great store, pottery shop. Anyway, I took my group into Jericho Just got off the beaten path and drove down the road in Jericho. I mean, as soon as I got there, in the Middle East, there can be exuberant, expressive people. And I got off the bus, and I just turned around and looked like a Yasser Arafat type guy with not a beard but lots of stubble, just planted a kiss right on me. I mean, he was so happy that I was bringing a busload of pilgrims to Jericho to eat lunch and shop. But anyway, there are cultures. But our culture is so heavily sexualized now, you can't do anything without people reading, physical sexuality, even friendship. That's why, by the way, C.S. Lewis wrote the book, The Four Loves, and he talks about the importance of friendship. And by the way, that's why I also tell couples, before you marry, make sure you become good friends. Because if you introduce the sexual element too fast before you do the friendship element, it's hard to go back and do the friendship element after you've become lovers. And that's part of what's going on in culture. People become lovers and they never become friends. And they're not marrying their friend. They're marrying somebody that on day 2 or 3 or 4 became their lover. Yeah, we need to learn how to do friendship again. That's why C.S. Lewis said as much as he did about friendship and included that as one of the 4 loves. Anyway, look at this very touching scene where Jewel and Tyrion, they're best friends, the unicorn and the king. So it starts out, "Kiss me, Jewel." Yeah, that just even sounds weird to our culture. It has not throughout Western civilization, but it does to our culture. "Kiss me, Jewel," Tyrion says, "for certainly this is our last night on earth." And don't forget what's going on. "And if I ever offended against you in any matter, great or small, forgive me now." That's why there's a prayer in the Book of Common Prayer that says, "Good Lord, deliver me from a sudden death." We really don't want a sudden death. Well, unless you're better than the rest of us. We don't want a sudden death because you're not ready to die yet. I'm not. There's some things I need to say to some people. If I knew I were dying tomorrow, I might ask for forgiveness for some people. I might tell some people I love them. I might say some things that need to be said. That's why the Book of Common Prayer says, "Good Lord, deliver me from a sudden death." Because we have work. If only those who are prepared to die know how to live. That's the wisdom of Saturn. That's the wisdom of this book. So make sure before the end comes, you do what you need to do and say what you need to do. So here's Tyrion saying, "Kiss me, Jewel. If this is our last night on earth. If I've ever offended against you in any matter, great or small, forgive me now." You make it right. Whatever, if you know the end, and the end is coming if you haven't figured that one out. But if hopefully God can be good enough and gracious enough to us that we get a little advance notice the end is coming, and we can make some things right in those closing days. And then notice what Jewel the unicorn says, "Dear King, I could almost wish you had, done something to offend him. I almost wish you had so that I might forgive it. Farewell, we have known great joys together. If Aslan gave me my choice, I would choose no other life than the life I have had, and no other death than the one we go to." They know where they're going. Yeah. Again, nobility, courage, bravery, be involved in the battle between good and evil. Anyway, so in chapter 9, that you see they're heading back to Stable Hill. There's a great sketch by Pauline Baines. In my edition, it covers a whole page of them sort of hiding in the shadows behind the stable, looking at what's going on in Stable Hill. Here's something that is important, because again, part of what this book's about is please be wise. Don't be gullible. Don't be naive. Don't let puzzle be your role model. Be able to discern, be able to notice good from evil. And this book is helping you pay attention. Because again, one of the major themes is all the repercussions of deception. And that's just part of the conflict. Look at, and this is masterful. I wish our culture could relearn this. In my edition, it's on page 127, almost on the last page of chapter 9. Here's the ape. Shift. Puzzles being captured. Someone's got puzzle, so the truth can come out that puzzle was just a false Aslan, just a jackass with a lion skin on them. Notice what the ape's wise. That's why you got to be as wise as a serpent, Jesus says, because the enemy's wise. So it's the paragraph that starts, "It was seen last night," screamed the ape, "but it got away." People wonder where Aslan is. "It was seen last night," screamed the ape, "but it got away." Now again, keep in mind, the good guys are in the shadows. They're getting ready to come out and say, voila, here's the false Aslan. And people are going to just accept truth. Well, evil knows better than that. "It was seen last night," screamed the ape, "but it got away. It's a donkey, a common, miserable ass." Here's Shift admitting that to the crowd. "If any of you see that ass," and then of course the beast, they growl. Jill looked at the king. His mouth was open, and his face was full of horror. Their whole plan just got messed up because the ape's out here saying, yeah, well, it wasn't a real Aslan. His mouth was open, his face was full of horror, and then she understood, and this is what our culture needs to understand. If you're going to be a wise Christian, you got to understand this. And then she understood the devilish cunning of the enemy's plan by mixing a little truth with it. They had done what? Made their lie stronger. Yeah, you mix a little truth with it, you'll get people to believe it. Heresies, false teachings, and every heresy the church has ever dealt with has some truth in it. But you take truth to an extreme it's not meant to be taken. Yeah, the enemy knows that. When Hitler came along and said, we need to recover from World War I. Yeah, they did need to recover from World War I. When Hitler came along after World War I and the Treaty of Versailles and the terrible inflation and the ruin, that's why after World War II we had the Marshall Plan. We said we can't do to countries again what we did to Germany, because what we did to Germany after World War I, we ensured World War II. And that's why we ensured that Hitler would come along and say, let's make Germany great again. So Hitler was right about all of that. He was elected to rule. We have to recover. We have to make Germany great again. We have to stop the inflation. We've been mistreated. The Treaty of Versailles was bad. It was too extreme. It sought to destroy Germany after World War I. So Hitler mixed quite a bit of truth with his lies that went after people. So the enemy's smart. So we have to be wise as serpents. Don't be gullible and stupid. Be able to pick out this. We read the text last week from 1 John chapter 4, verse 1. Know how to test the spirits. Know how to discern truth from falsehood. So, again, know the repercussions of deception. Know how deception. The enemy, the devil is called the father of lies. He didn't start lying last week. That's been the history of the enemy. He's father of lies. He knows how to do deception. And, literally for God's sake and our sake, don't be puzzled. Don't be puzzled, bless your heart. Don't be puzzled. Be able to discern truth. So, chapter 10. We're going to go through 3 of these chapters real fast. Chapter 10, that's where, again, they're on Stable Hill. That's where the dwarfs say, right above the picture of Rishta Tarkan, the sketch of Rishta Tarkan. No, shouted most of the crowd, but the dwarfs. And again, if the dwarfs say it, don't imitate it. No, they're not good. These are not the same. These are not Snow White's dwarfs here. No, shouted most of the crowd, but the dwarf said, "That's right, darky." These are from the east, from the west, east. "You've got it. Come on, monkey. Show us what's in the stable. Seeing is believing." I hear Christians say that, and that's stupid. Yeah, we can see things all the time and convince ourselves it's not right. it's not true. We can rationalize anything. The human mind's amazing when it comes to it. Just because you see it, just because you experience it with your 7 senses, it doesn't mean you'll believe it. Because we can rationalize about anything. In the Christian faith, believing is seeing. It's your belief that helps you see things. C.S. Lewis famously said one time, I believe in the sun not because I see the sun, but because by the sun I see everything else. I believe in Christianity not because I see Christianity, but by Christianity I'm able to see everything else. So believing is the lens that we put on to see and interpret and understand life. It's not believing is seeing, not seeing is believing, because we are wonderful at convincing ourselves of anything we want to convince ourselves of. I'm sure I've told you this story, but I never know who I'm talking to. It's probably been a long time. In my second church, I was sitting down with a couple. She wanted to put the marriage together. He was having an affair. So, I'm not brilliant, but I just looked at him. I knew the affair had to end if they wanted to put the marriage together. So I looked at the gentleman and I said, this is true. All my stories are true, but this is a true story. This man, I looked at the man and I said, are you having an affair? Because I knew if he was still enjoying that they were wasting my time. Are you having an affair? That man looked straight at me and said, I don't know. And I didn't laugh, but I'm sure my face betrayed something. And I just looked at him and I said, we can figure this one out. Are you having sexual relationship with someone that's not your wife? He looked straight at me and said, yes, but I don't know if I love her. I said, it still counts. It still counts. Human beings, we can convince ourselves of, because again, that's how the enemy works. Particularly if the enemy can mix a little truth in it. I deserve to be happy. I was waiting for that guy to say that to me next line. I deserve to be happy. Mix a little truth with the lie, and that almost makes the lie that much more powerful. Anyway, seeing's not believing. The dwarfs say that, so beware of that. Okay. Just point out another, because they're just kind of getting back to the end in the last battle. Tyrion says, on top of my page 134, right underneath some of the animals, including some dogs. Don't you love the dogs? They are faithful, they're honorable, they're loyal to their king. C.S. Lewis loved dogs. Did you pick up he hated cats? Yeah, I keep waiting to see Ginger over here. I'm going to apologize to her for the Ginger in this book. The tomcat, the Ginger that's in this book. C.S. Lewis was not a fan of cats. He loved dogs. But right underneath the picture of some of the dogs, Tyrion's talking and he says, but courage, child, we are all between the paws of the true Aslan. Again, courage, bravery. Take the adventure that Aslan sends you. Don't just cower, because then in the next sketch is where Ginger goes in to try to deceive the people, to go in and pretend that there is still an Aslan or Tashlin inside the temple. And Ginger goes in, and you see an amazing picture of Ginger, the tomcat, come flying out of the stable. And she's caterwauling. I still can't believe C.S. Lewis wrote, you have been, he's talking about the most horrible caterwaul you've ever heard made everyone jump. You have been wakened yourself by cats quarreling or making love. I can't believe he referenced cats making love. I've never been awakened in the middle of the night by cats making love on the roof or whatever, but I imagine they make some racket. So there's Ginger. And because there is something in the stable. What or who is in the stable now? Tash, the evil pagan god Tash. Well, that's then, after that you get introduced to Emeth, Hebrew for truth. Emeth, the good Calorman. You get introduced to him here. And you're going to learn some more about him later, and we'll have time to talk about Emeth. Emeth's a great character, a good colorman, kind of like a good Samaritan. A good colorman. They're hard to find, but with Emeth you found one. So Emeth decides he wants to know truth. He will risk death to know truth. He will risk whatever it is just happened to. And by the way, whatever happened to Ginger, now she cannot speak anymore. She's back to being a dumb beast. Can just caterwaul at this point. But so Emeth is willing to risk whatever it is that Ginger just experienced to go in and find truth. So yeah, you're getting set up to learn more about Emeth and appreciate him. So he decides to go in the stable. He goes in the stable, and this because Emeth's as a colorman, when he goes in the stable, another colorman falls out dead from the stable, but our good guys are close enough to see it's not Emeth. So wonder where Emeth went. You're starting to get towards something now. Wonder where Emeth went. We're going to talk about the stable in just a moment. The image of the stable and how that image changes throughout the book. So then you get to chapter 11. And, the battle, the pace quickens is the title of chapter 11. So the battle really happens. The dogs are there. Colorman reinforcements show up. So chapter 11, and you got a sketch of it. In my edition, page 149, one of Pauline Bain's sketches. You got a sketch of the battle, the fighting that's going on. It is fairly detailed. And again, it may be a little gruesome for children. To read this. They probably do. They probably do. They're used to seeing violence on all sorts of television now. But anyway, it's pretty dramatic. It's literally blow by blow. The battle's going on. That's pretty much what you have in chapter 11. And then, Tash grabs Rishta and takes them into the stable. So people start going through the stable. Starts going in the stable. The enemies of Tyrion and Unicorn, the enemies are trying to push them through the stable door. So I hope that you've paid attention to the strong image of the stable. By the way, there's getting ready to come a quotation in your next week's reading where I think it's Jill who says, "There was once a stable in our world that contained more than the whole world inside of it." So as soon as you hear we're stable, your mind should have went back to Bethlehem, I hope. But what you see in this book is stable. It starts out as an image of deception. It starts out as the way that Shift and Puzzle and Rishta and the Colormans are deceiving the people. By the time you work your way into chapter 12, the stable becomes an image of redemption. Comes an image of not just horror and terror and Tash and the deceit, but becomes an entrance into Aslan's world. So again, one of the major themes of this book, besides the repercussions of deceit, theme of redemption. Yeah, he is a redeemer. He saves. He delivers. He rescues. And he can take the garbage of this world. We hold these treasures in earthen vessels. He can take the garbage of this world, the affliction, the pain of this world, and cause them to become doorways into Aslan's world. You with me? Notice how the stable gets transformed. It's not transformed by accident. It's transformed by the work of Aslan. And by the way, in case you haven't noticed, Aslan has not appeared in this novel. You notice that, right? He's referenced, he's mentioned. You see people trusting in Aslan. Though it's really hard. They see Shift, they see the Colormans, they see the battle in front of them, they see the stable, but they still are holding on to their faith, their trust in Aslan. They know that they know the character of Aslan. Yeah, Aslan will eventually show up, but he has not shown up yet. He's been referenced. So you got people like Tyrion and the Unicorn, Jill and Eustace, who have faith in Aslan. He's not shown up yet. They wish he'd show up, but he's not shown up yet. Anyway, so we're going to go through the stable door. Paying attention to how it's being, it's not a shrine of Tash any longer. At one point, Rishta says, throw them into the shrine of Tash. It's not a shrine of Tash anymore. And notice that your text tells you, at this point, there's no more nonsense about Tashlin. You heard that early on. That's what told Tyrion this was a lie. Tash, Aslan, same thing, different names for the same God, different paths to the same place. That's just, we talked about that last week. That sort of religious syncretism, all paths lead to the same place. We all have different names for God. That's as illogical, but again, we're in postmodernity that doesn't do logic. That's as illogical as saying all politicians are the same, so Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders are the same. Only as somebody who has given up on all sense of logic would try to put stuff so contradictory together, like a Tash and an Aslan, and say, all gods are the same. You have your name, I have my name. We all have different paths. Well, they know better than that, and that's why by this point they've dropped the word Tashlin, the blend of Tash, the pagan god, and Aslan. Anyway, but notice, before I want to read a chunk of this, it's in my edition. In my edition, it's on page 161.
Chapter 12?
Yeah. We're in chapter 12 now. We're going to hang out in chapter 12 on page 161 in my edition. It's where Jewel, the unicorn, we love unicorns, symbol of resurrection in medieval Christian art. We love Jewel. Here's Jewel nosing Jill gently, and you notice what Jewel says. It may be for us, talking about the staple, it may be for us the door to Aslan's country, and we shall sup, dine at his table tonight. Yeah, we like Joel. It may be for us. And whatever you think this terrible stable is, whatever the hardship, the pain, the battle, the war, the conflict, the disaster, it may be for us the door to Aslan's country, and we shall sup. And again, supping, eating, dining. Behold, I stand at the door and knock, and who opens the door, I will come in and sup with him. Yeah, this whole thing of eating a meal with Aslan is a very biblical symbol. It may be for us the door to Aslan's country, and we shall sup at his table tonight. I'm just curious. That's on my page 161. I never know about different editions. How many of your editions, that's on page 161? Yeah, so I always have to tell you where it's at. I just wish they'd all make all editions the same page numbers.
This book is on 146 at the bottom.
Okay, so yep, that's why I always have to tell you. In my edition, I try to point it out to you. But yeah, it may be for us the door. So when you're going through life, you be spiritually wise. Whatever you're going through, it may be the door to Aslan's presence. It may be the door to Aslan's life. Remember what Joseph said about the evil his brothers had done to him, the Old Testament patriarch Joseph. I think it's Genesis 38, maybe. No, Genesis 45. It's where Joseph says, talking about all the bad stuff his brothers did to him, like sold him into slavery. Remember what Joseph said? What they meant for evil, God meant for good. Yeah, so be wise as you watch life. So then in my edition, on page 165, there's that amazing picture of Tash, that horrible pagan demonic god, carrying away Rishta. He's croaking. And now what I want to do is just read how this ends, because we've gone through a lot to get to Aslan's world. And from this to the end of the book, we're in Aslan's world. And this is such a good place to be. Heaven, if you don't realize that. We're in Aslan's world. So in my edition, This is like the last 3 pages of chapter 12. And I'm going to start where it says, but immediately from behind Tash, pagan demonic god is still here. When we talked last week about in biblical cosmology, pagan gods have some power because they're supported by demons. But immediately from behind Tash, strong and calm as the summer sea, a voice said, are you with me? That's where, because we're going to hang out here for a little bit. So all this is still going on. It's bad warfare. Tash is running around. But all of a sudden, immediately, a strong and calm voice says, be gone, monster, and take your lawful prey to your own place. Yeah, hell's created for certain people. It's their home. It's their place, not yours. So don't go there. Be gone, monster, and take your lawful prey to your place. In the name of Aslan, and Aslan's great father, the emperor over the sea. So here comes like the voice of God speaking out. You know, this is either Aslan or Aslan's father, the great emperor over the sea. And then at that point, the hideous creature vanished with the Tarkan, that's the Calorman ruler, still under his arm, and Tyrion turned to see who had spoken. And when he saw, and what he saw then, set his heart beating as it had never beaten in any fight. 7 kings and queens. Look at what he sees. 7 kings and queens stood before him. These are the friends of Narnia that he saw in a vision. 7 kings and queens stood before him, all with crowns on their heads, all in glittering clothes, but the king wore fine mail as well, and had their swords drawn in their hands. Tyrion bowed courteously and was about to speak when the youngest of the queens laughed. These are the 7 friends of Narnia that you've met. If you know their other chronicles, you met them throughout all the chronicles. He stared at her face and then gasped with amazement, for he knew her. It was Jill. Now he thinks he just left Jill in the battle. It was Jill, but not Jill as he had last seen her, with her face all dirt and tears, and an old drill dress half slipping off one shoulder. That's what she had looked like when she was fighting the battle. Now she looked cool and fresh as if she had just come from bathing. And at first he thought she looked older. Watch this. At first he thought she looked older, but then didn't look older, and he couldn't never make up his mind on that point. And then he saw that the youngest of the kings was Eustace. Again, he left him in the battle. But he also was changed, as Jill was changed. Yeah, you're on the other side now. You're on the other side. They're changed. They're clothed differently. They're glorious. We don't know if they're old or young. You know, I'm sure I've mentioned to you that there have been some Christians like Augustine who said in eternity we're all going to be age 33. That was not one of Augustine's better moments, but I can accept that. And of course, why did Augustine and some other church fathers say we're going to be age 33 in eternity? Jesus died at age 33. I'll take that. I'll take age 33, kind of for my eternal youthfulness. Keep reading. Tyrion suddenly felt awkward about coming among these people with, watch this. He felt awkward. He came among these people with the blood and dust and sweat of a battle still on him. Next moment, he realized that he was not in that state at all. He was fresh and cool and clean and dressed in such clothes as he would have worn for a great feast. Great feast, sup with me, messianic banquet, marriage supper of the Lamb. All these images from the Bible about eternity that he would have worn for a great feast at Cair Paravel, which is now fallen in the world. But in Narnia, your good clothes, watch this. This is C.S. Lewis making a statement about clothes in England. But in Narnia, your good clothes were never your uncomfortable ones. He grew up with Eton collars for a young boy. They knew how to make things that felt beautiful as well as looking beautiful in Narnia. And there was no such things as starch, Eton collars, or flannel or elastic to be found from one end of the country to the other. So he's comparing English clothing with heavenly clothing. Sire, said Jill, coming forward and making a beautiful curtsy, let me make you known to Peter the High King over all the kings in Narnia. Now again, you've had hints throughout the book. You're going to be told, obviously, at the end of the book, but you should pick it up right here. These folks are all dead, right? They all died in the railway track crash. So he says, let me introduce you to Peter, the High King over all the kings in Narnia. Peter and Susan become the High King Queen way back in the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Tyrion had no need to ask which was the High King, for he remembered his face, though here it was far nobler from his dream. Remember the dream he had, and that's when he called for help, and Eustace and Jill came. He stepped forward, he sank on one knee, and he kissed Peter's hand. High King, he said, you are welcome to me. And the High King raised him and kissed him on both cheeks as a High King should. Then he led him to the eldest of the queens. But even she was not old, and there was no gray hairs on her head and no wrinkles on her cheek, and said, Sir, this is Lady Polly, who came into Narnia on the first day. Well, that's the magician's nephew. If you know what that's wonderful. If you don't worry about it. But it was Polly and Diggory who go and create, or the first to go into Narnia. This is Lady Polly, who came into Narnia on the first day when Aslan made the trees grow and the beasts talk. Magician's nephew is the creation story for Narnia. He brought him next to a man whose golden beard flowed over his breast and whose face was full of wisdom. And this, he says, is Lord Diggory. Yeah, that's the professor in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, who was one of the first to go with Polly to Narnia. And this is the Lord Diggory, who is with her on that day. And this is my brother, King Edmund. And this is my sister, Queen Lucy. Now watch this. This has got Jack in a lot of trouble. Sir, said Tyrion, when he had greeted all these, if I have read the chronicles aright, there should be another one. Has not your majesty two sisters? Where's Queen Susan? Yeah, this got him in trouble. We're going to talk about Susan in a moment. My sister, notice what you learn about Susan. She was a queen in Narnia at one point. She was among the four that come to Narnia in The Lion, the Witch, and Wardrobe. But where's she at now? My sister Susan, answered Peter shortly and gravely, is no longer a friend of Narnia. Well, that doesn't get him in trouble, but keep reading. Yes, says Eustace, and whenever you've tried to get her to come and talk about Narnia or do anything about Narnia, she says, what wonderful memories you have. Fancy you're still thinking about all those funny games we used to play when we were children. So she's older and she sees Narnia as something that was make-believe, something that was not true, something that was not real. She's gotten intoxicated with what she thinks is the real world culture. She thinks Narnia is make-believe and childhood fantasy. And think about how hard it is for some people to believe in this culture. It's like they think the Christian faith is make-believe, heaven, Holy Spirit, God, Son of God coming to earth is make-believe.
Wendy and Peter Pan does this.
Wendy does, because she gets older.
She's older and she has children, but she doesn't remember it. It's fantasy for her too.
Yeah. And maybe what Barry for that book or Jack is saying, don't lose the awe and the wonder of childhood. You know, it's easier for children to believe as we grow up. It gets harder for us to believe in things we can't see. Isn't that sad? That's why belief gets harder the older we get. Now look at her. Look at how her adulthood is described. Oh, Susan, said Jill, she's interested in nothing nowadays except nylons and lipstick and invitations. She always was a jolly sight too keen on being grown up. Yeah, that got C.S. Lewis in trouble. Yeah, painting a grown-up female concerned about nylons and lipstick and invitations to parties. Well, I'm going to read you something about Susan in a minute. A child one day wrote C.S. Lewis a letter and said, Susan makes me sad. And so C.S. Lewis had to explain a little more about Susan. Anyway, I'll read it to you again. Notice what Lady Polly says. Grown up indeed, said Lady Polly. I wish she would grow up. Yeah, she became an adult. I wish she would grow up. She wasted all of her school time wanting to be the age she is now. I remember my father telling me not to wish away my life. She wasted all her school time wanting to be the age she is now, and she'll waste all the rest of her life trying to stay that age. If C.S. Lewis were writing now, he'd, at this point, probably talk about plastic surgery and facelifts. Her whole idea is to race on to the silliest time of one's life. Yeah, C.S. Lewis probably say mature years, childhood years, or the better years. Hopefully you have some wisdom at the end of your life. But she just wants to spend her time at the silliest time of one's life, paying attention to her social circle and all that stuff. She wants to race on to the silliest time of one's life as quick as she can and then stop there as long as she can. Well, this knows what Peter says. Well, let's talk about that now. Let me just go ahead and read you. Yeah. By the way, I do commend, you can get it in one volume called C.S. Lewis's Letters to Children. It is worth reading. We've done it in my C.S. Lewis group. In January of 1957, a little child wrote a letter to Lewis that was bothered by all this. This child feels sorry about Susan. So Lewis, he was a kind man. So what Lewis writes back is, the books don't tell us what happened to Susan after this silly period in her life. The books don't tell us what happened to Susan. She is left alive in this world at the end, having by then turned into a rather silly, conceited young woman. She couldn't turn into a silly, conceited young man. But yeah, he's gotten grief over this one. But there is plenty, watch this, he's saying to the child, but there is plenty of time for her to mend, and perhaps she will get to Aslan's country in the end in her own way. I think that whatever she had seen in Narnia, she could, if she was the sort that wanted to, persuade herself as she grew up that it's not all nonsense. But anyway, so yeah. If you feel sad for Susan, you don't really know exactly how it ends. But she's not here. She's not among the 7 friends of Narnia. So pick up the warning that Jack is putting down for us as we get older. Don't have such a hard heart that God can't get through to you as you mature. Anyway, so they move on. Well, let's talk about that now, said Peter. Look, here are lovely fruit trees. Let us taste them. Some of you just went through the book of Revelation with me. When you got to chapters 21 and 22, you read that the leaves of the trees are for the healing of the nations. You also encountered the tree of life in eternity. Yeah, they're lovely fruit trees. Let's taste them. And then for the first time, Tyrion looked about and realized how very queer, English words change over time, how very queer this adventure was. Comments, reflections. This preaches. What all do you think? And we'll never fathom the depths of this. What all do you think Lewis is trying to say to you as adults as you read these books to children? Yeah, I mean, they keep faith. Jill and Eustace, not perfect people, particularly, well, Eustace is better than he used to be, but Jill and Eustace and the unicorn and Tyrion, that's why I think in the book, Tyrion, for a little bit he's confused, but then as soon as they start saying Tash and Aslan, he knew that was a lie. So they had faith in Aslan. Even though they died, they had to go to battle. He has not shown up. In the other books he shows up, comes and goes. I'm sure they're wondering, where is Aslan? Why is Aslan not showing up? He seems to be 2 kids. Why is Aslan not showing up? But yeah, saying something about belief and faith at that point. Yeah, learning to experience the presence of Christ in his absence. Learning how to hear his voice in the midst of his silence. I hope you need to do that in life. If not, faith is going to be real difficult.
His voice while you suffer.
Yeah, and that's part of the silence. I wish he'd send me an email and tell me exactly why everything's going on and happening. Like he doesn't send me an email. So that you have to learn how to experience and trust him in the silence, in the darkness, in the conflict, in the battle. Yeah.
John of the Cross said that.
St. John of the Cross, coming out of the Christian faith, coming out of the Bible, we'd better learn how to appreciate and value the dark night of the soul. For a culture that's into pleasure and comfort, dark night of the soul is hard. That's why that Christian classic by St. John of the Cross. Yeah, we need to value the dark night of the soul. And by the way, here's a good point to say this, because I haven't said it. The Chronicle, and I hear some people write about C.S. Lewis, and they say this. C.S. Lewis expressly said, more than once, Chronicles of Narnia, they're not allegories. Everything in the Chronicle of Narnia doesn't have a direct relation to something else. If this was an allegory of the book of Revelation, Aslan should have shown up and won the battle. It doesn't happen here. So these aren't allegories. Don't always try to make everything fit perfectly into Bible or anything else. He actually coined a word for these, but he was adamant these are not allegories. You can't find, everything here doesn't have a direct relation to something in the Bible. He's telling a story. He's getting at some truths. He coined a phrase for these books. He called them supposals. Supposals. Just suppose Jesus, and he almost says this in some places, just suppose Jesus came to another world. He came here as a babe in Bethlehem. He may show up in another world as a lion. Just suppose. So yeah, it's not a direct relationship. When I first read this book, I'm like, when's Aslan showing up going to kick rear ends and defeat the Battle of Armageddon? I was looking for the Battle of... This doesn't end like the Battle of Armageddon. He's talking more to... again, we know the Christian truths here. He's talking to us more about... somewhat about the end of history, somewhat about, valuing this world and this life too much. But he's given us a lot of encouragement how to make it through the tough times. Yeah, if we don't see Aslan, Jesus... That doesn't mean he's not active. That doesn't mean he's not working things out. It may look like a stable where a hideous creature lives. It might be the pathway to Jesus. There's a lot of wisdom here. Some people have said, and maybe true, by the way, this August we're doing Mere Christianity for the 4 weeks of August. There's copies of Mere Christianity all over the world because it's one of maybe the top Christian book read in the 20th century. So people are already bringing me extra copies of Mere Christianity. You don't need to go out and buy one. Here's 2 that they said you're welcome to take, both hardcover right there. But, some people say that what Lewis is doing here in the 1950s, he wrote the serious theology, but as he's getting older, and he actually wrote it one place, as you get older, hopefully you'll get old enough one of these days he said, hopefully you will get old enough one of these days to read children's books again. So in the latter part of his life, he's writing fantasy, but he may be doing as serious theology as he did in Mere Christianity. He's just presenting it in a different way. So yeah, we'll do his serious prose in August. Anything else, we'll get out of here. The next 4 chapters are so amazing. The next 4 chapters, we could just roam around Aslan's land and meet Emeth. And you're going to see how everybody has to come and face Aslan. Some will come and face Aslan, look into his eyes, and feel love. and turn to one side. Some will come and face Aslan and feel terror and have to turn the other direction. So yeah, what are you going to see when you see Aslan? You're going to see someone you know, someone you love, someone you've spent time with, someone who's been a part of your life as a constant companion. I heard somebody this past week define holiness or growth in holiness as growth in friendship with God. Are you growing in friendship with God? So that when you see, all of us shall stand before the judgment seat of Christ, Paul says in Romans. What are we going to feel when we look into his eyes? Are we going to look into the eyes of somebody we've made an enemy of our whole life? Somebody we've told to stay away from us, don't bother us, don't interfere with my life. I don't know you, never wanted to know you, I was too busy. Or you're going to look into the eyes of someone that you love. I mean, that's a beautiful image you're going to see. The last 4 chapters are amazing in this book. So it's almost like you had to get rid of one of them. You can't have 8. 7 Chronicles. 7's a big number. And for those that just went through Revelation, we found 7s everywhere. That is completion. It's sort of God's number. Yeah, poor Susan might have just got axed because you had to have 7. You had to have 7. Yep. Again, let's pray together. And next 4 weeks, next 4 chapters, and it is 4 chapters left, right? Chapter 16. Yeah, I think maths, C.S. Lewis. The only reason C.S. Lewis could go to Oxford and become a great, great, great scholar was because he was in World War I. He opted out of the math exam to get in Oxford. They gave some lenience to World War I veterans. So that's why I do say C.S. Lewis and I both feel about the same way concerning math and numbers and algebra. I think he even said one point, not to offend you, I think he said math is of the devil at one point. That's sort of the way. I still have nightmares of being stuck in. I was forced to take one mathematics class in college, and I took an algebra class, and I still have dreams. It's past drop ad. I'm failing. I can't drop the class. I still have nightmares of being stuck in algebra class. But I do think there's 16 chapters, right? So there's 4 left, yeah. So I thought we divided up evenly. In chapter 16, you see the sketch. You're going to get to meet one of my favorite characters, because of course he's in Aslan's land. You're going to get to meet Reepicheep. I love Reepicheep. Anyway, let's pray together. God, I thank you for this group of people that want to know you and make you known. And God, we know it's not easy. Life's not easy. Knowing you's not easy. Being faithful to you and trusting you throughout all of life is not easy. But we know that in Jesus Christ you have created us and you have equipped us to do the hard things of life. And we give you thanks for that. In the name of Jesus Christ we pray. Amen. See you around.